JavaScript is terrible. It's absolutely ruined the web. I miss the days where I could just go to a website and read the text on it. It didn't have to deal with things like interactive pages, actually useful applications and features, and the occasional pop-up or ad. I'm being a bit sarcastic. This article is not. According to Jono, JavaScript broke the web and called it progress. I have a feeling I know where this one's going to go, and I have a feeling I'm not going to be very pumped about the tone and direction of this article. While I do agree that most websites are awful, I have a feeling the way that we get there is going to be quite a bit different. Everyone who's been sending this to me has been telling me excitedly how much I'm going to hate it. So this is effectively an act of, I'd be careful saying self-harm because YouTube censorship, but you get the idea. This one's going to hurt me a lot. I need to be compensated for my pain. So quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive right in. If you're using Next.js, you're probably using Vercel. It's the best cloud for Next. What if you're using literally anything else? What cloud gives you that level of quality experience and all the pieces you need in order to build good apps for your users? You go set it up yourself in AWS, you can figure out everything else yourself, or you can use today's sponsor, Savala, who have figured all of this out for you, regardless of what stack you want to ship on. If you're on Rails or PHP, Python or WordPress, whatever the hell you're using, there's a very good chance that not only it works well on Savala, they actually have examples on how to configure it right. These guys make it so even my dumbass can deploy tons of random services. They even now have templates for a bunch of different things you might want to deploy. Obviously, frameworks like Django and Laravel, but also CMSs like Ghost. Moodle is going to give me trauma. I've been through it with Moodle when I was in high school. It's a learning management system, but also even Next. So if you do want to use Next on traditional servers, you're good to go. And then other companies that I've worked with, like Firecrawl, the open source scraper for websites, all just one click away from deploying. And I mean it. I've clicked it and I've deployed it. And when you go in, you can see everything about your service. It will automatically set up Cloudflare in front with DDoS protection. So you don't have to go set these other pieces up yourself. If you want to cache parts on a CDN, you click settings, you turn on CDN. You don't have to go configure a bunch of shit other places. It's so nice to be able to do these types of things with 2 clicks instead of being an expert in multiple different cloud platforms, different infrastructure. On one hand, Savala is a cloud, but more importantly, they're an alternative to hiring a team to build your cloud for you. The real world is multi-cloud. You need servers, you need CDNs, you need firewalls, you need so many other pieces. In Savala, instead of pretending they're an all-in-one, they are an all-in-one by giving you all of the different clouds and their best parts. Get started today and you'll get $50 of free credit. Check them out now at soydev.link/Savala. Most websites are awful. I'm sure that this will be a very well justified statement and that it won't be things that were true before JS that are actually mostly due to advertising, analytics, tracking, and all these other things, and nothing to do with JavaScript itself. I'm sure that will be the case. And I'm sure that things before JavaScript back in like the Flash and Java era were also obviously way better. Most websites are awful. Not just slow, awful. Bloated, fragile, over-engineered disasters. They load slowly, render erratically, and hide the content behind megabytes of JavaScript. They glitch on mobile, they frustrate users and confuse search engines, they're impossible to maintain, and somehow we're calling this progress. I will say I am increasingly frustrated at the number of these types of things that I experience on the web. The slow loading things that should be fast, the erratic render conditions that I hit. I just had a bug earlier on Twitter where when I went to one of my friends' profiles, it would say I was following them and then it would flicker back to the follow back button over and over again. These type of things happen a lot. Oh, that's a fun quote from chat. The author's an SEO consultant. SEO consultants are making the web worse. This is an objective fact. I cannot imagine anyone saying otherwise, that SEO consultants have been a net positive for the web. No, that is obviously the case. Is this whole thing just going to be like pandering because he wants to be an SEO consultant and JavaScript made that marginally harder, but also actually benefits the web, unlike stuffing keywords and backlinks all over the internet, effectively being a spam bot as a service? I'm sure this one will be good. Oh boy. Oh, even better. Maybe the author's upset because AI is making his job irrelevant and he's going to take it out on JavaScript instead. That would make sense. Okay, walk it back. Don't come in so hostile. The fact that so many websites are as bloated and slow and miserable to use as they are is a real problem. The fact that mobile web sucks is also a real problem. I would blame a lot of different parties for that fact. Hopefully, we could find things to agree on in this article that I'm sure I'm going to love a lot. The tragedy is, none of this is necessary. Once upon a time, we had a fast, stable, and resilient web, but we replaced it with a JavaScript cargo cult. Now it takes 4 engineers, 3 frameworks, and a CI/CD pipeline just to change a heading. It's inordinately complex to simply push a web page. Oh boy, I have thoughts already. I'm going to propose an alternative challenge. What if instead of a heading, which in this case I'm certain means change the title on a page or something, what if instead we wanted to change the top nav? What if instead we wanted to change this part of your site, the thing at the top of it? If this is not using a framework or something like JavaScript, you probably need to go change that in a lot of different files. Or, crazy, use tools that have reusable pieces called components so you can change it in just one place and move on. It's crazy, I know. But to think that like it takes 4 engineers to change a heading, no, you're hiring bad engineers or stuck dealing with bad teams. There's no world in which my one-off commit that I push straight to GitHub that builds and deploys immediately is that much worse than whatever the fuck you think you're talking about here. On top of that, 2 people can build crazy things. Mark and I, solo, were able to build a real competitor to ChatGPT and Claude with T3 Chat. We didn't do that because we're gods. We certainly didn't do that because we relied on old faithful standards like HTML. In fact, we went harder on client side than we've went in a long time. The vast majority, like 99% of the code on T3 Chat is client side JavaScript because it has to be to make a good interactive experience like that. If your view of the web is blog posts and marketing that you sell as a service because you're an SEO consultant, I can see why you're upset at JavaScript. Because JavaScript is using the web as a platform for actual applications and software, not for writing shitty marketing blogs in order to make people buy your service. This isn't evolution. It's self-inflicted complexity, and we've normalized it because somewhere along the way, we started building websites for developers, not for users. No, I talked about this in other videos, including the different ways to render HTML video that I'm really proud of. We got here because we started building more complex websites that did more things. Instead of a website having just text content or a form that on submit would have to reload the entire page in order to make a post in a forum, we moved towards a dynamic web, an interactive web, a web where we could actually do things that weren't just write in a form and hit submit. Things like Gmail were only possible because they moved beyond the idea of the web just being HTML files. This is from the author. Nothing says our devs don't know what they're doing more than when your website has a loading bar, skeleton layouts, or progress indicators. The irony is that these things almost always slow down the loading process. Just make the thing inherently fast. It's easier than ever. No, it is not. As I have established many different times, and I will continue to demonstrate through examples, I built a lot of different services using a lot of different strategies. This is one of them. This is ping.gg. It's like Zoom, but for streamers. This app uses effectively no server-side rendering at all. It is a client-side app. It's also a client-side app that doesn't work in Firefox because we're focused entirely on good WebRTC experiences, which is all words that Firefox doesn't know how to say. And here is my dashboard on Ping. I click Join Room, and as soon as I click it, it moves. I click Home to go back, and as soon as I click it, it goes back. If I click Join, I'm clicking Now. Immediately, something happens. That's the difference when you do client-side rendering. Was there a loading spinner when I clicked that join button? Yes, very briefly, as it got the right permissions and did other complex things. Some part of the loading spinner was more data loading in, yeah. Some part of that loading spinner was doing things that require time to be spent on the client side. That is the nature of how interactions work. Loading doesn't always mean loading from the server unless your job is selling marketing slop to random companies. Real applications do things. Sometimes they need to go get some data. Sometimes they need to just interact with your device. All of those things feel significantly better if, on clicking them, they happen immediately. I know this for a fact because Ping is objectively a bit slow. We used old tools and technologies before they were well established and before we had good workarounds, and sometimes the cold starts for a Lambda for navigating around Ping are 1 to 2 seconds long. It's kind of nuts. The problem is that when you click a button and you wait for the server to generate the page to avoid the loading spinner, you get something different. You get the loading bar on the top of the page instead. And that loading bar feels awful. It doesn't happen in the place where you clicked. So when I click here and the loading bar appears at the top of the page, I'm still on the same page. It's unclear if my click went through, so I'll click a few more times, sometimes submitting more requests and generating more things. Even if rendering it on the server is faster, it will often end up feeling slower. I know this for a fact because to this day, despite ping being objectively by the numbers slower than almost everything else I have built, I regularly get compliments and questions asking, wow, ping is so fast. How did you make it so fast? It's not. It's slow. But it feels fast because whenever you click something, something changes immediately. We don't delay a UI update when you click something or when you interact. You might see a loading spinner, but you'll see one loading spinner until the rest of the content is done. I've done this diagram so many different times. I don't care. We're doing it once more. The user clicks, server renders the HTML, answer comes out the other side. Even if it's a CDN or static content that doesn't need to be waited on the server for, it's something that takes time. And here's the difference. If we client-side render it, or use something like a framework like React on the client side, do traditional single-page app style development, even if it takes longer, because there are multiple different steps, there's a big difference. So if it takes longer for us to get to this endpoint, there are other things that happen that are really cool. The big one is that instantaneously you will see something. So you click and immediately you have different content on the page. So we'll put this as over here, loading. This is the loading spinner moment. We'll make this yellow because the difference I want to emphasize is it feels way better to see something immediately on click than to have to wait until after you clicked and the server rendered and sent a response, especially if you have like high latency or a bad internet connection. Having to wait after a click to see if the thing happened or not sucks. So we immediately show loading spinners. At the same time that we're now showing these spinners, we are kicking off some work too. We are going to make some API requests. And I'm going to make this worst case. We'll do API request 1, and we're going to pretend that you suck and you didn't set things up so that you only do one request. We're going to pretend that we have to cascade them. We have to do some waterfalling. Since we don't have to render the HTML, the response will be a little faster once we've done those API calls, but we'll even exaggerate this a bit. We show the spinners. So the spinners are still showing. I'll emphasize that by doing this. So the spinners are showing. Once we figure out what components we want to render, we poorly render API request 1 and then API request 2. And then once that second request finishes, we have to, on client, process the data. This will be a lot shorter, depending on like how slow your DB calls are and whatnot. It's a little bit more realistic. You have to process the things you got back, generate an HTML response that the user can see, and now the user sees what they're here for. This is when you would get the final content. I don't feel like drawing a better diagram for this. You've seen me and others do it in the past. I couldn't even find the old one for some reason, but the point here is that even if the client-side rendering thing takes longer, it ends up taking significantly less time from when you click to when a change happens in the thing that you're clicking on. And humans perceive those things very both well and poorly. They perceive the time between when you do something to when a change happens really, really strongly. There's a lot of studies about this between how many milliseconds and seconds an action to interaction takes and the likelihood that you feel like it's fast or slow. If it takes more than 100 milliseconds, your brain stops thinking about the thing the same way. It starts to feel slow. If it takes more than a second, if it takes more than 10 seconds, you're going to churn and go do something else. But making sure the user sees something, ideally in under 30 milliseconds, but at least under 100 is really important. And if you have to do a whole call out to a server, wait for a response to come back, and then render it, you will click and wait and not know if the thing is working or not, especially because that loading bar at the top of a lot of these pages is slow and not very visible, so you might not even notice it. It sucks. If you've tried to build a real app that has data being rendered from real databases that aren't immediate, or not just like a crappy WordPress blog, you know how slow some of those pages can take, and more importantly, how miserable it feels, because when you click, nothing happens. Even if it takes 30% to even like double the amount of time to do it the client rendered way, the client rendered slow site will feel faster than the SSR version, because when you click, a thing happens. On top of that, there are methods to reduce these loading times. Let's say we figured out how to do these API requests at the same time, and then we can process it way earlier. Now, all of a sudden, oh, we're actually rendering it faster than if we wait for the server to re-render the entire page. Or if you fetch these ahead of time, we move these out to before, so we already have the data. Now we just process the data that we already have, and now we're showing the content even sooner. The magic here is that we have different strategies when we do client-side rendering because we control the client. We control what goes into the data fetching mechanisms, what data we're fetching when we fetch it, and how we turn that data into HTML. Where with SSR, we send a request to a URL. The URL points at a server. It has to figure out everything about that user again, fetch all the data and context it needs, generate an HTML page, send it down to the user, and now finally they see something. The fact that we have more options, all of which are better than the SSR strategy when we do more client-side rendering, is not a flaw of client-side rendering. It's one of the benefits of JavaScript, that we as devs can choose different ways to fetch data when we fetch that data and how we turn it into HTML. Those options mean that more bad developers are making more bad decisions, but that's the nature of any skilled force or any skilled place. If there are ways to do things dumb, they will be done in those dumb ways. I know that for a fact, and the author should too, because I have browsed a lot of WordPress sites. And I can't believe you're complaining about the state of the web today with all these tools and technologies that are owned by devs. How many WordPress sites have been compromised? I have personally lost a lot of time and money, and more importantly, information that I can't recover because I had one old WordPress deployment on an old server that got hacked and used to take over my entire service. It sucks. And that was the web we had before. So sure, if you think that's cool and good and dandy, awesome, good for you, but it's bad faith. Back to the article. I'm bad-mouthing too much without even reading it yet. How did we get here? Around 2010, something shifted. The iPhone was ascendant. Native apps were sleek, fast, and fluid. Angular, the first mainstream JS framework for the web, had just emerged. And suddenly, every CMO started saying the same thing in website briefs. Can we make it feel like an app? The fact that you're thinking in CMO terms about web apps says so much. We've had the word developer come up once so far, and next proper noun for a job role that we had was CMO. Developers, armed with new frameworks and good intentions, said yes. JavaScript could, in theory, do seamless transitions and slick UI, so we built towards that promise. Or at least we tried to. Spoiler alert, we didn't get app-like performance. We didn't get better user experiences. What we got was an arms race of complexity. Do you sincerely think that the old Yahoo Mail website was better than Gmail, or better than Superhuman or Mail Zero, which I'm an investor in, biased, of course? Do you sincerely think that we didn't get any better user experiences on the web as a result of these tools and technologies? That we don't have teams of dozens of people building things that would have been either impossible or taken thousands before? Do you sincerely think either that T3 chat is a bad experience or that T3 chat could have been built even easier and been better if we didn't use JavaScript on the client side for it? Like, are you joking? It would have taken 100 people minimum to make something close to the quality of T3 chat where everything is server side. Actually, it couldn't be done because the way SSE streams work would not be a particularly viable experience on the client side without a lot of JavaScript. But even if you self-rolled a little bit of JavaScript to make the update layer functional and did everything else server side, it would be a comically worse experience. I'm saying this as somebody who went too far the wrong way. We went all in on local first, and local first is a fucking disaster. That's a video waiting for another time. The fact that the potential for complexity resulted in unnecessary complexity when bad developers used it doesn't mean that these tools are the problem. I say this all the time. When something becomes popular enough to become the default, that means it's the default. The fun thing about any field is that when you look at an average, half the people are below that line. Just imagine an average dev in your hand. Not even a web dev, just an average developer, somebody totally right in the middle. Half of developers are a worse programmer and dev than they are. The majority of them are going to pick the default tool because they don't know any better. The fact that these JavaScript-based frameworks like React, Angular, Node, and all of these became popular enough to be the default means that the majority of less skilled developers are going to adopt them. That's the nature of being popular, is less capable people will pick the popular thing. Doesn't mean the popular thing is bad. That means bad people pick the popular thing because, again, it's popular. You can't use something's success against it. You have to at least understand what this is. We started solving simple problems like navigation or layout with tools built for full-blown applications. Kind of agree. I'll admit, if this was an attack on Gatsby, I'd be all in on it. There were a lot of tools and technologies that use things like React very incorrectly. If your site is mostly, if not entirely static, you don't need a JavaScript framework. Use one if you want to. Like if it makes your life easier to use Next.js instead of Astro for your static site, fine, whatever. If as long as the content loads without the JS, you're fine. But I would pick Astro for a static site still. I still use it for things like my personal blog and whatnot. But that's not the majority of where we're spending our time as devs. That's the important thing. Everyone loves the stat that's like, the majority of websites aren't using React. They're using jQuery and PHP. Yeah, if we measure the web by the number of URLs, sure. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a pretty heavy web user. I'm on the web for hours a day. I'm on like 6 websites. If instead of measuring the number of URLs with a given technology, we were to measure the number of employees working with a given technology, the number of employees working on a given URL, or just the number of hours being spent on the websites, the hours spent on sites based on React is a much bigger number than the hours spent on websites based on PHP. Someone just pointed out in chat that this entire article is like a postman's review of how email should work. Yeah. I'm excited to see where this one goes. I'm not going to lie. At the same time, JavaScript stopped being just a front-end language. With the rise of Node.js, JavaScript moved to server-side. And with it came a wave of app developers entering the web ecosystem. Can someone else translate this sentence for me? I'm not following. Are you saying that app devs were server-side and now like Node.js got backend devs to start building for the web? I'm genuinely so confused about what he thinks this sentence means. Dude thinks JS was for apps before the web. Translation, syntax error. What? Yeah, everyone understands. This is a mess. Also, on the topic of WordPress, WordPress is an unauthenticated remote shell that, as a useful side effect, also contains a blog. That's so good. That's so good. Apparently, according to this at least, the reason that the web sucks is all these app developers from backend suddenly learned JavaScript because of Node, and now they're ruining the web. Is that right? These weren't web designers or content publishers. They were engineers trained to build applications, not documents. He said the quiet part out loud. He does not want the web to be for apps. He wants the web to be for slop. Suddenly it all clicks. And also, like, this first sentence emphasizes how little he understands the world outside of his bubble. The only way you think that Node resulted in all of these existing app devs from servers to suddenly infect the browser with this language that they learned because of that. No, this requires a level of delusion and false understanding of the history of all of this that has tainted my ability to be good faith for the rest of this reading. I will try my best, but it is getting increasingly hard as his misunderstanding of the web is confidently stated over and over again. They brought with them the architect-first mindset, patterns, state management, dependency injection, abstracted logic. The result, a slow cultural shift from building pages to engineering systems, even when all the user needed was to load an article. What if I told you most of these things are overused and that I agree here, actually? The fact that model view controller patterns infected the web for like 10 years and we're still working on clawing them back is absurd. The fact that I'm still talking to engineers that are like senior to principal level at these big real companies and explaining to them that their weird MVC model being shoved into the browser is actually slowing them down, but they're convinced they're right because they have a 500-person team shipping slop that never works. If Jono got into all of this during the Angular era and saw what Angular was doing to the web, I can actually understand where his perspective comes from. Because the way that Angular initially especially thought about building applications was so wrong that it was dangerous. That's why I don't believe in this separations of concern bullshit. And it's why I love things like Tailwind. It's why I love React, especially post-function components into hooks, because it lets you not think in architectures, you think in experiences. You build the feature you want to build, and now it is a component that can be reused in other places. I'm actually more sympathetic because of this. If he was there for the Angular era and he watched that all happen, I can understand why he is so skeptical about everything else going forward. But I would encourage that he actually look into how React works and why it was made, or watch the Rethinking Best Practices talk that I just did a video on that I loved because it's a really good talk. Back to the article. And so we rewrote the rules of web dev around entirely different needs almost overnight. Not content, not speed, not interoperability, not discoverability, just code. Might I remind you what the web used to look like? I'm exactly old enough that I was there for this, that I saw all of the disasters that occurred whenever you browsed the web. all of this slop covering everything you tried to find on the internet. And the reason SEO was valuable was primarily because if you got people to go to your site, you would make money off of these ads. Specifically, you would make money off of some random grandfather clicking the download button that wasn't the real download button, and getting a virus on their computer, and then the scam company pays you 50 cents for the click. Do you really think the web used to be great and virtuous and it got ruined by React and not this? Are you fucking kidding? There is some good news though. We have JavaScript. I can click this little button in the corner of my browser for uBlock, which is a JavaScript-based extension. And when I click it, the ads all disappear. JavaScript saved the web. It made it more interactive, it made it more functional, and it gave us as users more control over how we experience it as well. I will never understand why so many of these people go so ham on JavaScript and won't even acknowledge that advertising and viruses and bad incentives are what actually ruined the web. Much worse than all of the things they're complaining about in the same categories that they are complaining about. The further we went down this road, the more the stack drifted from the fundamentals. Semantic HTML, optional. Server-side rendering, rebuilt from scratch. Accessibility? Maybe, if there's time. Performance? Who cares when you can save costs by putting load burdens onto the user's device instead of your server? This is the biggest self-own. I see this one a lot. I actually wrote a blog post for the first time in years because of this particular bad take and how often I've been seeing it. It's becoming increasingly common to see claims that SSR is expensive, unnecessary, or solely employed by cloud providers to inflate your bills. The sentiment oversimplifies the reality. SSR probably saves you money. The overhead is minimal. Turning JSON into HTML is relatively cheap. Things that aren't so cheap are database queries and authentication checks. And if you have to make a ton of authentication checks, you're probably spending more time on server code than you would if you just had to make one. To be fair, this is kind of a case against single-page apps. But if he's going to bitch about SSR, I'm going to bitch back because he's wrong. SSR is so cheap. The reason you move to client has nothing to do with cost savings. The reason you move to client is experience savings. You know, thing I diagrammed earlier, because now when you click, you see something sooner. Again, we have a new service that's more successful than anything else we've built in a long time with T3 Chat. We're doing all of the rendering on client, not because it saves money. We do it because it makes the app feel way faster. We are intentionally eating the hit on SEO in order to make a site that is better to use. We, as competent devs that understand JavaScript, picked client-side rendering because it makes our application faster. You, as a marketer that thinks they know how to write software, confidently claims that we are only putting burden on the user device to save costs. Are you fucking joking? Gradually, the web became something you had to compile before you could publish. Not because users needed it, but because devs wanted it to feel modern. Here are some things that we got from compilers. We got more efficient code being sent to our users. We got better reliability of the things that we wrote with checking and error handling as part of our build process so we knew if mistakes were made. We got the ability to compose software from lots of different sources as we build better things. We got the ability to reuse parts in multiple places instead of copy-pasting the same HTML across hundreds of pages, needing to change it in all of them at the same time. Hot take. Compilers are a good thing. And the entirety of the replies to this is, yeah, they are. I made a joke. Other people who think compilers are a bad thing, Ruby devs. The point being, compilers are not a bad thing. They allow us to make better, more reliable software that is more complex. If your software doesn't need a compiler, I'm happy for you and the 1 to 2 people max that you work with every day. But for those of us building real applications, compilers make life much better. The cult of developer experience. Today, we optimize for DX, developer experience, not user experience, not performance, not outcomes. The only DX I've mentioned so far in my response to all of this has been the DX of updating the banner or top nav of your website, which in your world either sucks or you're using WordPress where somebody wrote all the dynamic parts for you anyways. Today's popular frameworks are sold on their DX. No. React is sold on its maintainability and performance characteristics and simplification of annoying things. But do you think server components were sold purely on DX? Kind of the frustration people have is that they're not. The docs are slick. Yeah. Oh man, this tells so much about this author. You have no idea how long the documentation for these tools was horrible for and how long it took for it to get good. The onboarding is smooth. The tooling is smart, integrated, and clever. You can spin up a new app with a CLI command and feel productive before you've even written a line of content. But good DX doesn't guarantee good UX. In fact, it's often the opposite. No, they're unrelated. Ideally, you can make the happy path that brings the best user experience be the best DX. Do you know what's a good example of something that makes the UX better through a DX improvement? Linters and compiler checks for things like accessibility. It's really nice having a compiler in a build step that checks to make sure all of my image tags have ARIA labels and ARIA attributes so that they can be used and experienced by people who are vision impaired or blind. That's a thing that I would miss a lot before I introduced build tools, compiler tools, and linters to my applications. That is a DX win that improves the user experience as well. There are so many of these, and I cannot think of very many, if any, times that we picked DX over UX with any of the architectural decisions that we made. If this is a comment about Flutter, I'm with you, sir. But if it's a comment about the web, it's a misunderstanding of the web at best. The more comfortable we make things for devs, the more abstractions that we add. And every abstraction creates distance between the thing being built and the people that it's for. This is another one I could actually very slightly get behind. There are absolutely abstractions, like really heavy things like Flutter, that very much abstract you from the user experience, the device, and the standards. But how does an abstraction like TypeScript, for example, move us away from the users? What about type systems and compilers make it so that we are putting distance between us and the people that we're building for? Now we have component libraries generating button markup. We have page metadata managed in JS functions. We have image loading strategies buried in config files. All of these are good things. Literally everything he listed here is a good thing. Buttons being components that we can reuse, having style guarantees, usability guarantees, contrast ratios that are reliable, ARIA attributes that are accurate, and all these other pieces. Like as silly as it sounds, making a good button isn't as easy as rendering the button HTML. Page metadata managed in JS functions is also a good thing because page metadata usually requires data. It's right there in the word, data. How are you fetching that data? How are you getting that dynamic data? Your options are use a server language like PHP to fetch it from the database and then stuff it into an HTML template with a weird templating syntax. Or, crazy thought, use a language that's already standard on the web platform to do all the exact same things so you can reuse the data fetching and collection logic on client and server. Crazy. You already have to manage, if your metadata isn't a static HTML file, you already have to manage it in functions. It's a matter of, do you prefer the functions that are PHP or do you prefer the functions that are JavaScript? And if you have an irrational hatred of JavaScript, suddenly functions are bad. And don't even get me started on image loading strategies. Oh God. Every time I do this rant, people get mad at me. I don't care. They're all wrong. WebP is one of the best things that ever happened to the internet. The fact that most web pages are still serving unoptimized, poorly, if at all, compressed PNGs and JPEGs. Like 90+% of the images on the web are JPEGs and PNGs that are huge and way slower to load. If your complaint is that the internet is too slow, you should really like image loading strategies that make that problem go away. The fact that we have all these awesome new codecs, and now we have these awesome tools like configurations in things like Next.js that make it really easy to just load an image via the URL the way that you want to do. And now the user doesn't get this giant 20 megabyte JPEG. They get a 12 to 20 kilobyte WebP without you having to do anything differently. That's a great thing. That's the perfect balance. That is a UX win and a DX no-op. We haven't changed the developer experience at all, but we've made the user experience significantly better. The paragraph after complaining that DX doesn't guarantee good UX. You got to pick one argument, bud, or at the very least understand the points that you're arguing with. Everything's optimized for devs and hostile to everyone else. Who is image loading strategies and config files hostile to? It seems like the way you phrase this, that the problem here is the developer experience with these things, that it is an unnecessary level of developer involvement. All of these things make stuff better for users. Anyways, this isn't accidental. It's cultural. We've created an industry where complexity is celebrated, where cleverness is rewarded, where engineering sophistication is valued more than clarity, usability, or commercial effectiveness. Fuck it. I fully agree with this one. I'll die on that hill, actually. The fact that complexity is as celebrated as it is disastrous on so many different levels. I've seen this in enterprise especially often. The person who writes a 30-page report on a change that is a regression for users and then goes through and does it with a 20-person team gets a promotion. But the individual developer who notices problems that users are having and then goes and fixes them and maybe writes a 1 to 2 pager afterwards on like how they did it and why, the one who looks like they did more work gets the promotion, and the one who's actually fixing problems the way they should be fixed not only doesn't get the promotion, they might get written up for it. That's a very real thing. I don't think that has anything to do with the technologies that we're using. In fact, one of the fun things when we moved to React at Twitch is that a lot of that culture had to die on the website, and the few people who still engaged with it ended up embarrassed. Because building things the right, simple way to solve user problems is always the best thing you should do. And I think this actually might be where I can start finding agreement with me and the author. If he honestly perceives these tools as the cause of all of this, or even inverse, he sees this as the problem and these tools came out of it, that I can understand why he's being so irate here. Because this is a real problem that sucks. If you've ever been on one of those teams where a random person wrote this crazy proposal that was full of fancy words and terms and doesn't actually do anything for the users or makes things worse for them, and you're the type of person that watches this type of video, that sucks really hard. That sucks so hard that I wouldn't blame you for getting a little bit delusional as a result of experiencing that, especially if you experience it for an extended amount of time. I can sympathize with him a lot more because of this paragraph. And I'm going to do my best to try going forward to read it from the lens of what he said here. But again, as chat's pointing out correctly here, what he's describing sounds more like Corpo Java than it does like React. Also, another good thing from Demi here. To be fair, I think we all have bad takes that are informed by trauma. Might even rant a bit in the team meetings, but generally smart enough not to make a blog post and say, hey, you should hire me because of this take. That's bad. Yep, totally agree. The fact that he is putting his trauma out there by shitting on a whole world he doesn't understand is not good. But I can sympathize with the trauma he is feeling if it is rooted on this part here. And then immediately takes away so much of my good faith. It's easier to win an argument by citing SSR compatibility issues than it is to ask, why are we using React for a blog? 3 thoughts there. Don't use React for blogs unless you have a good reason to. Hydration issues aren't that hard to solve. They're all just date almost always. Like 90% of them, especially for a blog, it's just date time stuff. And third, caching is hard, period. And a fourth one, don't use React for a blog unless you have a reason to. Yeah. This sounds like an actual experience he had, and I can sympathize because of that. But I promise you, the teams I have dealt with on the blog and content management side have been some of the worst over-engineering dumbasses I've ever met in my life. I got in a long fight that almost got me in trouble at Twitch because the person in charge of the blog didn't know how to embed anything other than an MP4 or a PNG. So when we actually didn't even know how to embed the MP4, the way they would embed MP4s is they would upload them on Twitch back when you could still upload videos and then embed the video player. For the ModView launch, one of the products that I built, we had a little 4-second example of how it was used that looked really cool that my designer and product manager put a lot of time into to make like a really good like 4-second view of it. It was meant to be like a small WebM type thing you'd embed in a blog post to show off the product. The guy running the blog was like, okay, cool, yeah, we'll get that done. And then they put up the blog post for our launch, and it has 5 manual click to play Twitch players that are covered in crappy UI that make you press a button to see a 3 to 5 at most second clip. I go out, I immediately DM, I'm like, what the fuck did you do? We sent you these small MP4s to embed. He says he can't get them to embed in autoplay. I think he was using WordPress or something. I say, okay, fine, whatever. Here is the HTML to embed in the post. He does it, but he doesn't point the URLs at the right files. At this point, I'm frustrated. So I take the files, I re-encode them as WebMs. I put them on our own S3 bucket, mark it public, hand him the exact HTML with the exact URLs already embedded to make it work correctly, and then tested it by embedding it in the page myself to make sure everything was good. I spent like 4 days of back and forth doing this shit with this guy. And then he goes and pastes in the HTML, doesn't even check if it works, and ships it. His shitty interface for doing that, which he built himself and claims to be an engineer, escaped the URL characters for the URL because it expected it to be a local URL to his asset management tool that he doesn't even know how to use, and it broke all of the embeds. At which point, I gave up and gave him what he was asking for the whole time, 20 megabyte GIFs. I'm sorry. The fact that that dude got another promotion before getting laid off is worse than anything that is being cited in this fucking article. I'm sorry. I almost got in trouble for not even raging at him, raging to my team, just venting because of how pissed off I was about that. I got like a warning from a manager saying like, hey, chill out, man. You're going to get in trouble if you go this hard on this thing. I'm like, this dude isn't doing his fucking job. He shouldn't be employed here. I could, in my like spare like 1 hour on the weekend, do his entire job for him more effectively. And I would never get promoted for it because I wouldn't pretend it's more complex than it fucking is. So I feel you here. But Jono, the world you come from does this 100 fucking times more than mine does. But it's also possible we're coming here from the same place, that you've had 1 or 2 experiences with web devs and they sucked. And I've had 10 to 20 experiences with SEO managers and blog managers that were even worse. We've all been there. We've all done that. I don't write blog posts about how CMSs are evil, but you just have a stronger feeling, and that's fine. It's wrong, but it's fine. We keep optimizing the wrong things because it feels good, because it's fun, because it looks modern, and because nobody stops us. Do you think these super smart people invented these incredible technologies because it was fun and felt good? Maybe some amount, but most of them do it because they perceive a specific problem that they want to solve, usually around performance and experience, or maintainability and complexity. Complexity becomes the default. This is how it spirals. We don't just tolerate complexity anymore, we expect it. We assume every site needs a build step, a bundler, a hydration strategy, a routing layer, an API layer, a design system, and some clever cache and validation logic. We build in microservices, host on edge networks, and deploy pipelines to ship basic content. This guy seems to think the whole web is basic content. I guess if you think of all of these things like by their specific terms instead of like what it's bringing you, this is scary. A build step is a command. A bundler is how you turn the code into a thing users get. Hydration strategy is only relevant if you're running the same code on client and server and the client needs to pick up where the server left off. If you're client rendering or you're using something like Astro, which is fully server rendered, there is no need for hydration anything. And the idea of hydration strategy, no, there is no strategies. No devs are coming up with their own unique way to handle hydration. They are rendering the code on the server and then picking up on the client by just using React and Next.js. I'll say that for all of these. None of these things are stuff that people are building or even thinking about. The routing layer in most of these modern frameworks is files and folders that match the URL patterns. The API layer is functions you call to get data. The design system is components that you reuse. I know, crazy thought from somebody that likes to just paste HTML all around the place. And some clever cache and validation logic. No. If the site's static, it's static. You don't need any invalidation. And if the site's fully dynamic, it's fully dynamic. You don't need any invalidation. If you're building something that updates partially, regularly, having the ability to invalidate it on demand is really powerful and helps reduce load. Something you wouldn't understand if you're building SEO tools and not things that get actual users. It doesn't matter if you're publishing a blog post or an e-commerce site, the stack's the same. Heavy, abstract, engineered to the edge of usefulness. I can sympathize a bit here. The fact that we're using React for like everything is really cool. That we can use this one thing and it works well enough in most places to be livable is nuts. Like the same framework is used for building the operating systems on Meta Quest and PlayStation 5, the integrated experiences on things like Twitter and Facebook, and for e-commerce sites like Shopify is actually kind of cool. But at the same time, it means that the ecosystem has things that are built for one of those solutions and not others, and you can end up in a place where if you use the same tools for everything, you're in a bad spot. This is why I refuse to make a template repo for T3 Stack, and instead the community made a CLI, because I don't want people installing auth libraries and tRPC on their fucking blogs. The solution to this problem is modular design and picking the right pieces as you need them, not complaining about how heavy and abstracted everything is. The abstractions are actually the solution to this because they mean we can add and remove modular pieces as we need them. This is another fun one. Nobody understands it. Not fully. Are you saying they do understand? There's two paths we can go from this statement. Either you're saying that people do fully understand the alternative, which is WordPress. I know a lot of WordPress devs and 0 of them will claim that they fully understand WordPress. Or you are using a more general definition of understanding, and you genuinely believe that the average WordPress dev has a better understanding of PHP than the average React dev does of JavaScript in the web. And even there, I kind of agree. I'm on the line for it, but that's because there's 100 times more devs and a lot more devs using React than there are devs that ever used WordPress. But this is a non-statement, especially when you contrast it with no alternative is presented here. And the reason no alternative is presented is because they look even worse. Not the marketers, not the SEOs, not even the developers who built it 6 months ago. Every new tool brings new abstractions, new syntax, new mental models. Making a simple tweak to a headline, a meta tag, or a layout becomes a 3-step deployment process. It's madness. I'd rather, again, swap headline with top nav and the argument flips entirely. I would much rather a 3-step deployment process, which is build, lint, deploy, than I would prefer to edit the same 5 lines of code across 400 files and then push them all up manually via FTP. If you think too deep in the weeds, it feels like too much work is happening. But there's this really cool thing about computers. They can kind of just do shit. It's magical that a 3-step deploy process can be run automatically in parallel, and the whole thing is 10 lines of YAML code that you copy-pasted from another project or from ChatGPT. And now, every time anyone at the company makes changes, you know if they are safe, you know if the linting passes, you know if there's some accessibility checks done, that things are probably for the most part accessible, and you know when you click merge, that those checks will be run again just to make sure everything's okay. That's an awesome thing. But apparently that awesome thing is madness. We rebuilt the web like an air traffic control system just to serve a few kilobytes of text. Fine, don't use React for your blogs. WordPress is really heavy too, though. The worst part, most of the complexity exists just to retrofit things we used to get by default. Routing, metadata, caching, templating, and layout. You got templating and layout by default? I'd love to see how. You got caching by default? If you change the top nav on your site, how long does it take for users to see the new version? It is also funny because air traffic control is notoriously outdated, as someone in chat just pointed out. It's extra funny since air traffic control is running on floppy disks and shit. We're not innovating, we're rebuilding broken versions of tools that the web already gave us, and we're doing it badly. Oh, you mean like the loading bar at the top of the page that sucks and is objectively measured to be bad user experience? Anyways, the stack's rebuilding itself in its own image. Fast forward to today. Ironically, after years of chasing abstraction and complexity, the JS ecosystem is now scrambling to reintroduce the things that we lost. SSR, back in fashion. Routing, carefully managed. URL structures, metadata, even HTML output, all being rebuilt, one plugin at a time. Does he think of libraries as plugins? That would explain a lot, actually. If you come from the WordPress world, maybe you see the way that we build now less like Unix and Linux, and more like a WordPress install that comes with 50 plugins installed. If you did your time in WordPress, you know every time you install a plugin, you are exponentially increasing the chance that your whole platform falls apart and everything breaks. And that's traumatizing and hellish. And if that's how you're thinking of the package JSON, I can understand where this fear comes from. But in the real world, reusing battle-tested solutions that were built to solve real problems is a good thing. That's why the entire Unix and Linux ecosystems are built on these ideas. I think that the web tooling becoming more like the Linux world is a good thing. Apparently, the author disagrees. It looks increasingly like the thing we started with, a conventional CMS serving HTML rendered on the server, cache close to the user. Cache close to the user was not the case before. That's delusional. Conventional CMS, we're still not close to back there. And every time someone starts to go that way, something crazy happens, like payload gets bought out by Figma. So no, we're not there at all. This is a wild take. Would you call Twitter a CMS? Would you call YouTube a CMS? What is a CMS to you? Is it the thing you open as an SEO consultant, or is it a tool people engage with? We're rebuilding platforms. Oh God, he even calls out WordPress, positively. Are you joking? Are you actually joking? I'm gonna go insane. It would be funny if it weren't so exhausting. This is the end game of a development culture obsessed with novelty. We're not shipping better sites. We're reinventing basic infrastructure in increasingly convoluted ways, then celebrating the fact that it almost works. This article's a lot longer than I expected. If you want to read the whole thing, as always, the link's in the description. I'm going to summarize the last points to not make you suffer any longer and also to reduce my own suffering. I am amused that this next section is collateral damage to marketers and users, literally putting marketers before users. Literally just did that. Are you joking? That's how he thinks. That's why ads are okay and bloating the web with spyware is fine. No word about that anywhere. Yet for some reason, React is inherently ontologically evil. Wild. Almost like you think about marketers more than you think about users, and you're accusing us of thinking about devs more than users. Anyways. Marketers can't update copy or run experiments without raising tickets. They can't preview content, test layouts, or launch pages. Every change has to go through devs, pipelines, approvals, and rebuilds. On one hand, I can sympathize. If you are a marketer that is upset because you used to be able to change everything in WordPress and now you can't, I get it. But changing things in WordPress is not going to make a site that works on mobile. It's not going to make a mobile app that users can actually engage with and use. It's not going to make interactive pages that are complex viable at all. But it does suck if you're used to the WordPress experience of anyone could go in and update something and there's only like a 30% chance it breaks everything. Yeah, sure, that does suck. But the things that we're building are more complex. Previously, a website was a thing that would render in one type of browser, in one aspect ratio, with the same standard type of internet connection across the world. Everything on each side has gotten more complex. That's the nature of things improving. But I do agree that like it sucks now for non-technical people that they can't contribute. But yeah, a lot of the things that they want to contribute to are things they shouldn't be able to anyways. So 50-50 on this one. But if you're coming from this entirely from the angle of like devs building their blogs the way that Twitter's built and now marketers can't change things, yeah, that does kind of suck. I'm with you there. Okay, we can do some more agreement. JavaScript's powerful, but it's misused. Let's be clear, JS isn't the villain. It's powerful, it's essential. It enables rich interactivity, dynamic content, real-time updates, etc. It lets us build tools, not just pages. Is Twitter a tool or is it an app? Because I feel like you don't like apps. Most websites don't need to be tools. I actually agree fully here. Most websites don't need to be tools or applications, but this is again the distinction between different URLs versus hours spent. I hope we can all agree that the majority of time being spent on the web is not reading old blog posts. It's engaging in these tools and applications on the web. Way more time is spent on Twitter than most WordPress blogs combined right now. There are way more WordPress blogs than there are Twitter.coms. But when we look at it as a function of time spent or engineers working on the thing or level of complexity of the problem being solved, suddenly this argument goes away. I am so tired of the most websites argument because the majority of websites have not been updated for 15 plus fucking years. It's not a real argument for anything. I'll even fully cave here. The majority of websites shouldn't be using React because the majority of websites should be left to quietly die in their cold coffins in the corners of the web that nobody goes to anymore. That's the reality of the internet. The majority of websites will get 0 users and a couple bots. Not only do most websites not need to be tools, most websites don't even have users, so who fucking cares? While on one hand, I agree that even e-commerce doesn't need a framework, it does benefit greatly from it. If you can make things that feel faster to browse, you can have search experiences that don't require a ton of custom code to be written. You have cart management that doesn't suck. And also modals. Don't pretend you can do modals purely like vanilla. I've tried this far too many times. You cannot do it. The web standards for these things are absolute fucking trash. You have to write some dynamic code, and using a framework makes it significantly easier, especially if you care about things like accessibility. I love this. Some sites do have genuine client-side state needs, like login states. The fact that he's downplaying login is a thing some sites need says everything I think I need to. It's a shame how I never see these people talking about Astro. They always cite things that intentionally fully avoid JavaScript, like WordPress and Eleventy. You know, there are better modern tools that give you the things you're looking for here that allow you to bring in sensible JavaScript where it does add that real value. Apparently, the author installed a WordPress plugin for view transitions that's named Death to SPAs. Can't take the article seriously. Feels like a salty WordPress dev being upset with long packaged JSON files. I feel you, man. I can understand where the author is coming from, but where he's coming from is a small bubble that feels big because it's a lot of websites, but is small because it's a very small amount of traffic. I would encourage him to spend more time talking with developers that both care about developer tools and about their users. People, not necessarily like me, because I'm annoying to talk to, especially nowadays. I'm way too fucking busy. But the types of people who hang out here. I hope none of you have to suffer too much more. If you want to, links in the description. If you deal with people like this, I'm sorry. I got nothing else on this one. Thank you guys as always. And until next time, peace nerds.